All right, welcome back, guys, for another Wednesday live training. My name is Joel Evan, the founder of First Responder Fathers, and I am on a mission to help fathers, husbands, soon-to-be husbands or fathers, build unshakable marriages and deeper connection with their kids. And every week, I like to go live on a certain topic that I think is really, really valuable and crucial. And a lot of these topics actually stem from some of my private clients and just some of the things that I get asked over and over again. And one of the key things is communication. I think we all know that. And so I really want to break down today the framework. This is a framework I want to be very clear with. This is a framework that I learned from a recent coaching certification that I went through, really built all on brain patterns and deep psychology kind of work. And I paid $5,000 for this course. And so I'm going to give you some of the information I learned completely for free in today's video. We're going to go over the 5-step framework that makes up communication in the first place, right? The 5-step framework, we're going to break it down. Like, this is what communication is. And I think when you understand the template of communication, you're going to be a better communicator. You're going to know how to relate to your wife or your spouse in a better way. And the same thing is universal. It's going to go to your kids too, right? We want them to listen to us. We want them to respect us. We want them to follow through, do their chores. If you understand communication and you understand this 5-step framework, well, then you're going to know where in the framework, what's missing. Maybe what am I doing wrong? What am I not communicating effectively so that I can be a better communicator and get my message across? Moreover, what if you don't even want to do any of these things? You just want to be a better communicator, because if you're a better communicator, then you can be a better salesman. You're going to be someone better at your work, whether you're a police officer or a firefighter or whatever your job is. Communication is key. We need that. We know this. And really, to be an effective leader, wherever you are in your organization in the world, you need to know how to communicate, because then you can enroll people in your mission and get them to follow you. So this is really, really key. So we're going to go over that today. And I'm also going to tell you some of the pitfalls and ways that you might get trapped and things that you need to be very cautious of as you go through your communication journey. Now, before we get started, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Joel Evan. Like I said earlier, founder of First Responder Fathers. I'm a best-selling author, a coach, and I've also been a first responder. I was a police officer for almost 15 years in Oakland and San Francisco. So guys, I understand what it means to be stressed out and have no work-life balance. I've been married for 11 years, and probably 10 of those years I was just in a tumultuous relationship, always ups and downs. Never thought, I was always thinking, like, is this going to ever work out? I have 2 young boys now that are 10 and 6. There were days where I was just like, they hate me. Things are never going to get better. And if you know more about my journey, things have gotten a lot better. I feel, and I'm on a mission really to say, like, guys, marriage is awesome. And if you actually knew that your relationship could heal you, I think people would gravitate to not only staying in the relationship and not get a divorce, but they would actually look for ways to even go all in their relationship, because it's actually what heals you. And it heals each other, because the relationship shines a light on the things that are missing. And that is what I really want to share with everybody in the world, because I know it's possible now. And I've really developed a nice framework. So if you're interested in learning more, reach out to me. 1, I just want to help. And 2, if there's anything I can do to sharpen your sword and make you a better father, make you a better husband, make you a better leader, please let me know. This is what I am driven to do. And last but not least, if you're not in my Facebook group, it's a free group. Jump in, just comment or just drop me a line below and let me know, hey, Joel, would love to be involved in this free Facebook group where I can see more of these trainings and some of the other things that are going on and kind of have a community and a brotherhood. Also, I've got some really great free resources. I've just redid a 20-page guide going into the nitty-gritty of marriage, mind, body, spirit, kids, discipline, communication, all these things. And it's completely free. So if you want that, just drop me a line and let me know I want it, and I will send that to you for free. So let's jump into this. I'm actually going to share my screen so you guys can see kind of what I'm talking about when we dive into communication. And one of the caveats that I want to go through too, as we jump into this, because, I was thinking about this just the other day, and I was thinking about how, like, there's a 5-step framework that I'm talking to you about, right? There's a 5-step framework. And maybe most of you are thinking, like, this is ridiculous. Like, I have to follow a freaking 5-step framework to, like, be a better communicator? Like, I don't want to do that. Like, that's insane, Joel. Like, why would I do that? Right. Well, here's the thing. Because even I was thinking this, right? And I'm going through the training. But here's the thing. That's probably why you're not where you need to be in your marriage, in your relationship, with your kids, because you don't even want to do the work. You're like, 5-step framework. I have to break down communication in this way. Yeah, you might have to, especially if you're not a good communicator and this is something you're struggling with. Yeah, you might have to pause. You might have to study this stuff because, guys, I really believe marriage is a skill. Fatherhood is a skill. I wasn't given the skills, so I walked into my marriage just thinking, oh, I'll just figure it out as I go. And like, I'll do exactly what my dad did, but I'm going to be better than my dad. Well, yeah, that backfired. That worked out really, really good for 10 years that I lost in my life and could have had a way more flourishing marriage had I invested in the skills. Fatherhood is a skill. Learning how to discipline and raise your kids, it's a skill. And that's why we do these trainings, because I really believe if you understood that and you got the skills, maybe you would be better, because I wasn't given these things. And I'm sure most of you weren't either. So let's break down communication. Number one is it's going to start with your goal, right? When you're ever engaging in a communication, I was going to say communication battle, but when anytime you're gay, and it doesn't have to be a battle, that's already a bad thing, right? That goes back into assumptions, which is part two. But when you get into communicating with your spouse or your kids, right? Think about the goal that you're actually trying to achieve. Like, how are you trying to show up? What is it that you're attempting to accomplish or motivate or instill with this conversation? And a lot of us don't even understand, and it'll probably tie into number point 3 with motive and our motivations. Like, but what are you hoping to achieve? And I think a lot of us, we don't have anything in mind of what we're hoping to achieve. So right when we get triggered and we just fall into a trigger response and we're responding, right? When you have a goal of like how you want things to look and you have like the long-term vision of what you want, it helps you become proactive in the relationship. Many of us aren't proactive, we're reactive, right? And so I want you to think about, you see this big football here, and the reason the football is there, I want you to think of communication like a football. Imagine that I'm throwing you the football, I'm throwing you a pass, I want you to catch it, and then guess what? I want you to throw it back to me. A lot of us aren't thinking about having the ball respond back to us. That is a symbol of our spouse or our kids responding back to us. We're only thinking about throwing the ball. Like, I'm making sure the ball gets there and you know about it and you catch it. That's it. But we're not thinking about what's going to happen when the person passes it back to us, because we're not thinking about that. When you actually think about that, now you're thinking steps ahead. You're getting ahead of the game. Something I was talking with Matt Bodro on our podcast. Exactly. You're front loading the problem. So you're getting ahead in the action, right? So that's really, really key. Thinking about how the other person might respond. That's going to change the way you communicate. Number 2, assumptions, right? We all have assumptions when we come into conversations. Yeah, I know my wife. I know how she is. I know what she does. I know how my kids are going to respond. We've labeled them. We've judged them. He's shy. He's just always this way. He's defensive. She always does this. Guys, I've been there. Said it so many times, right? If you're already going into a conversation with the assumption that your wife's going to respond this way, probably not going to go well. And like in meditation, they always talk about like this, always come into meditation with like this idea of this, like the blue sky, or like seeing it for the first time. That takes a lot of work. I get it. You have to really maybe even push down your ego and subordinate it for a little bit, because there's a lot of history and a lot of trauma and a lot of things that have happened in your relationship. And so it's hard not to assume. But if you want things to get better, you got to start putting your assumptions to the side and look at this with a clean slate. Look at this with some newness, especially you're learning these skills. Probably some of you haven't even learned them. So you really need them, right? So you're starting right now. You might have been married for 20 years, but for 20 years, you were unconscious. The relationship is starting now. The skill building is starting now. So don't come in with those assumptions. Attention and motive, right? We're talking about that. What is driving you to communicate? Again, it goes back to this proactivity versus reactivity. I think many of us are coming in reactive. Our kids do something, we respond. Like, how could you do that? What were you thinking? Terrible. And I'm guilty of this too, right? Like, especially when I'm at threshold and I'm overwhelmed. I have bad days too. Like, are you kidding me? Like, what were you thinking? That's not going to elicit a great response from any of my kids. And you guys know that too. So if we get ahead of the problem, we can start to actually create a conversation about, instead of like, why did you do that? Like, we can actually maybe come at it with some curiosity. Like, hey, like, what happened there? Like, what were you doing? Like, what was going through your mind? Like, what were you thinking? Right? You can just see the tonality and everything change, because I'm already thinking about, why is my spouse or why is my child, why are they misbehaving in the first place? What are they trying to communicate with me? And what's at the root cause of this? And so if I can come from that place with a different intention or a different motive, right? Imagine this happens all the time in a household, right? Walking through, the house is a mess. The boys are just, my two boys are just getting crazy. Toys are all over the place. I step on a toy. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, why, what were you, like, clean this up right now, right? Because I'm reacting. I'm furious. I'm frustrated. Instead of like getting ahead of the problem and getting them to clean and communicating with them effectively beforehand, now we have a place to work with. But now I'm just reacting because I stepped on the toy. I'm pissed. Who wouldn't be, right? So we got to get ahead. Number 4, expectations. What are you trying to hold the other side accountable for on the other end? Remember, a lot of times you may not even want, they're unspoken, these expectations many times. They're subconscious, or maybe deep down, like you really want to say something, something, but you're afraid to say it. You're not going to say it. You got to be very guarded by these expectations because they're probably playing in the back of your mind. And if you're not aware of them, or even if you are aware of them, it's going to dictate how the conversation flows because you're expecting one thing. And so you really need to check your expectations and really just think like, man, what am I really trying to drive from this conversation? Because there might, and sometimes what I found, especially with other clients, is there might be times where you can't have that conversation, like the deep one that you really want, because of the timing, because of the situation, because the person's not ready. And so you might have to time it to come back to that conversation. A lot of us won't do that. We won't set aside time in the future to do that. Instead, we're like, nope, I'm going to tell this person how I feel right now, and I'm going to give it to them. And this is why they're wrong. And this is why this. A lot of times you can have that conversation, but just make it a second separate conversation. Like, hey, I noticed there were some things I wanted to say to you, but I don't think it was the time right. Do we have some time to talk now? Right. Even though you had different expectations of how that first conversation you wanted to go, you can always do it later when there's time and people are calm and cool and ready to receive this message. They're ready to catch the football and return it back to you. And then the last one is a big one, right? Style, body language, voice tone. I think they always say 60% of our communication, more than, so 2/3 is what it is, 63%, whatever that comes out to be, is all communication through body language, tonality. How many times have you guys, like your wife, I know for mine, rolling her eyes or just like looking at you with disgust and disappointment? Like, that used to just kill me. I wanted to just explode, or I would just feel terrible. Like, I'm a piece of crap. Like, she doesn't love me, right? So we know the power of style, tone. And my youngest, that's something I'm working on right now. He's very affected by tone. And so when dad raises his voice or seems upset with him, he just takes it all in. So tonality is a huge, huge one. So remember, guys, when you're going through this 5-step checklist, a couple key things to remember is this doesn't happen overnight. So you got to think about playing the long game, playing the infinite game. This is not some short little hack or something you're going to do and then things are just going to get magically better. It might, in the short run, you might get some good wins, which is great. But if you're playing the long game, to be an amazing father, husband, to inspire, to lift, to expand your family, that will always keep you more motivated and keep you going. So just remember that. Always commit to playing the long game. Don't look for some shortcuts into helping, you build the most amazing marriage. It's not going to happen overnight. And then lastly, let's go into what things you may want to watch out for. I think these are some common pitfalls, right? Number 1 is just reacting right away, right? Some of us have difficulty with authority. If you are one of those people, know that about yourself. Like, maybe you just always oppose authority. Well, if that's you, then you should have some awareness about that, because that's going to show up in your day-to-day communication, right? Looking for the gray area or looking for inconsistency. This is someone who's always like looking for what's wrong. Like, yeah, but, or, especially when you're communicating with your wife, I think there's times where you want to justify, you want to tell them like, no, that's actually wrong. Let me tell you why. Be careful of that. Be very careful if that's someone like you who's looking for any inconsistencies or way to prove your wife wrong or your kids wrong. Again, it goes back into kind of the expectations, the assumptions, right? Your intention, your motive, right? It all plays into that. Social justice or injustice, right? These are people that constantly feel like they're the victim. It's always me. Like this always happens to me. This nothing ever works out. I just have to always suppress my feelings. I always have to do the right thing. I'm the nice guy. Like, be careful of that if you're one of those justice warriors. And don't get me wrong, I've been there in those times too. So I'm not judging or blaming you or labeling you. It's just something to be aware of. Reactive or sensitive people, right? You have the empaths. This is a very deeper conversation we'd have to go into at a much later time. But just again, know your audience, know who you're dealing with if they're just super reactive or sensitive type of people. And then we have people that their job restricts them, right? Or the company culture or the organization that you're working for. We know this. I know as a police officer, former police officer, this was a big one, right? We as police officers wanted to go out and save the day, fight the crime. But how difficult was that in cities like Oakland and San Francisco, especially where it's super political and there's a lot of entities saying you can't do that. Actually, you're not allowed to put handcuffs on people because it's just violating their rights. I know as officers, we were just always struggling with like, I can't do anything. Like, what's the point anymore? And that can limit also if you're in the military or law enforcement or any kind of like firefighting or whatever, there's an organizational code too, right? You have to go through superiors. You have to talk a certain way. You can't just go up and say, hey boss, I need this. Like, no, there's a code, there's an ethics. So maybe you speaking your mind or communicating a certain way is not appropriate at all times. And so we have to be aware of that, and it can stymie us from feeling alive. One thing I will say in the police world, especially where I used to feel trapped as well, like, man, I just can't express myself the way I really want to. And I want to change the organization for the better, but they won't allow me. One thing that I always remembered is like, look, you only have two options. You can A, get another job, or B, keep your job, but find a way to be happy. And I think that's the easiest thing for most of us. We want to have an amazing job. You got to fix the problem. Either get a new job, stop complaining, or figure out a way to make an impact that job where you're working and have the greatest impact. So hopefully that was helpful, and I hope you guys enjoy this. I'm already running long. I try to keep these 10 to 15 minutes. I'm looking at the time. It's 17 minutes, so we've gone too long. I hope this was helpful, and it's going to help you in your relationship and sharpen your sword, make you a better father or husband. If you guys need more help, go ahead and check me out, firstresponderfathers.com. Website is coming, more new things. We've got an amazing course and 3-month program for guys that want to level up, be a part of a community, be a part of a tribe. And if that's something that interests you, reach out, drop me a line, and I'll give you all the details. Thanks again, guys. Have an amazing week.